Hey guys, first off I wanted to apologize about my voice. I've been fighting a flu cold thing for about 5 days now. Finally feeling well enough to get back to working on this set, and I hope to finish it in this installment. When we last left off, I had seemingly resolved all the major issues. Finally got the high voltage and boost voltage where they should be. Picture was looking a lot better. Sound was fine. But there was a little bit of static in the picture. I replaced the tubes in the tuner and it got better, but it wasn't completely gone. So I was getting ready to recheck all the connections in the tuner and IF and all that. When out of the blue I got a comment on a video I'd done over a year ago. And I started watching the video again to see what they had liked about the video, and I saw that right away that set had exactly the same problem. And I commented about it. In fact, the bulk of that video was me talking about the problem and trying to resolve it. And I didn't in that video, but in the next installment I did, and I'd forgotten about it. It's the converter box. Having it connected directly to the TV through this cable, through the balun, it's letting noise in from the box. I don't know if I think it's going down through the cable because I've tried moving the box around. It doesn't really seem to affect the interference. So what I did in the past was I set up basically my own little TV transmitter. And I take the composite outputs of this, feed it into the transmitter, put a good old-fashioned pair of rabbit ears on the TV, put the transmitter about 15 feet away, and static's gone. So that's what I'm going to do again. Also, I got a CU6 new old stock, supposedly, from eBay. So I'm going to try popping that in, see how that works. And out of curiosity, I got a comment about the damper tube, and I might try swapping a few of those out as well. It turns out, well, he sent me a link to a website that is really, really in-depth about tubes. And there's one whole blog post of just about the damper tube, the 6AU4 in particular. And it's the pros and cons, the strengths, weaknesses, and apparently there could be some that are not quite what they seem. Like they might be something like a 6AX4 that's been marked as a 6AU4. The 6AX4 draws more current, could be affected in performance. So, and also the 6AU4 damper tube is pretty critical to the operation of this circuits, and perhaps as much as the horizontal output tube. So when I kept swapping these out, it wasn't making much difference. Maybe swapping out the damper tube would have helped as well. So and those are cheaper and more plentiful for sure. So I'll dig up a few more and try swapping those out and see what that does to the performance. Oh, and by the way, flat panel TV I scavenged, it has slowly been drying out. See if I can get on a channel that's got more white. So there's just a few streaks left on the right side. Occasionally a dark spot does appear. I mean, definitely the backlight has got some kind of issue, but it's intermittent. Usually if I turn it off and back on, it goes away, and it won't reappear while the set's running. It seems to just be an initialization issue. And if that continues to fade away on the right side, yeah, this is definitely one heck of a find.
That's all.
Yep, that took care of the problem, all right.
Della, how would you like to get
I wish I'd remembered that sooner.
I thought you were supposed to be married first. What's on your mind?
Las Vegas, Ralph Hipperly.
So, just a good old, very vintagey pair of rabbit ears. Pre-UHF rabbit ears, probably from the late 40s. Actually, I know it's from the late 40s with a cast iron base. And my transmitter setup is over here. It's that same over-the-air converter box with the AV cables going into this bottom rack component here, which is a blonder tongue modulator. I've talked about these a bunch in the past. There's dedicated videos on YouTube just about these. I'm not going to repeat myself here. But this is set to channel 3. And here's the antenna, half dipole, and a V pattern, transmitting a whole whopping about 10 feet over to the receiver. Well, that's enough to get rid of the interference. So cool, I can proceed finally. I'm just going to try swapping out some tubes, see what effect that has, just to satisfy my own curiosity, if nothing else. Then time to start putting this thing back together. First though, while I still got this out, I can illustrate something that I didn't know about for a long time until I watched a video on, I think it was a Sinclair Pocket TV that talked about how much brighter the phosphor actually is on the other side. Because what happens is, so there's a glass CRT. They coat it with this phosphor goo like white paint. Electron beam hits it from the backside, and that light has to travel through the actual phosphor itself to get to the other side. You lose some of the illumination, but with this test CRT we can actually kind of peek around and see it from the backside, and it's actually a much brighter image. So what Sinclair had figured out how to do was make a CRT that was like a lollipop. So imagine if you took this CRT and like heated it up and then mushed it down so that this part became, well, visible. And then you viewed it kind of like from up here looking down onto the folded out CRT. That's how I made an extremely low power little pocket TV with really bright image using very little power. Not so practical in larger applications, so plus then LCDs came onto the scene very shortly thereafter, and it just became sort of a footnote in history. I thought you guys might find that kind of interesting. Okay, I've got the chassis back in the cabinet. I did not reinstall all the controls and the speaker and so on, so I want to make sure that it works first. I looked at the reference photos I took when I first opened up the set and put the ion trap magnet in approximately the right position. So let's give this a try. Definitely an awkward thing to work on with this big boxy cabinet. This is definitely a situation where you'd want to have a mirror while you're adjusting the controls from the back of the set. A mirror up in front of the set so you can see what's on the screen, that is, while you're back here monkeying around with stuff. If I turn the power strip on. Everything's lighting up. Static out of the speaker. Ooh, and some additional staticky sounds. That is some ozone, or some arcing rather, some corona discharge. Well, let's see if we can get an image first. And I'll try to track down where that's coming from. Oh yeah, it's faint, So I've got my hand on the back of the set. I'm going to manipulate that magnet on the neck of the CRT. See if I get it any better. That seems pretty good right about there. What I suspect is hissing and arcing back there. I can smell that ozone. I suspect it's the high voltage cup on the CRT. Fortunately, I can't see it. It's right on the other side of this. I suspect that because it was really hard. And when I put the... So it's got a suction cup that goes under the CRT. I'll show you better when I pull this out. And it should, when you clip it into the CRT, it should mount flush with the glass, and this does not. It's pulled away. So I expect there's some arcing going on around there. There we go, that. That cup should be flat and tight against the glass, and it's not. Luckily I've got a few spare leads I salvaged over the years, so I'll dig one up and have to pull the chassis out and do a little work on it. I had a heck of a time trying to get this off of the CRT, so much so I ended up just clipping it because I knew I was going to be replacing it anyways. And even so, I couldn't get this off of the CRT because this cup has just gotten so hardened. I couldn't flex it enough to get these squeezed together to pop it off. So, yeah, that's definitely got to go. So, here are some potential replacements. Let's see, this is very pliable. That's how it's supposed to be. This is a more modern one. I couldn't tell you exactly when it's from. I don't think there's a date on it. Probably 70s, maybe 80s. But CRT. High voltage connectors didn't really change much over the years, so even there's decades difference between these. Same idea. Squeeze these together, get it onto the CRT anode, and that should be that. I'm going to clean these out good. You see all that dirt in there. Likewise on the CRT. So I'll show you closer on the CRT, but the gist of it is there's a hole in the glass envelope, and they put a metal button on there, and that's where your high voltage connection goes through, so it connects the outside world to the interior of the CRT. Then there's a coating around the outside of the CRT that's grounded. So internally it's also coated. So the internal coating goes to that button, goes to the high voltage. The outer coating gets grounded, glass insulator, forms a capacitor. But, of course, you don't want the two to short together, so around where that metal anode connection is, there is an area where there is no external grounded coating. It's just clean glass. But over the years, soot and dirt can accumulate, especially if it gets attracted by the high voltage. So that can lead to problems. So between the dirt in here and dirt on the CRT, that could very well be causing the hissing sound I'm hearing, which is high voltage corona. So all I gotta do is unsolder that. Simple enough to do. And pop this on. And it's a little bit longer than the old one, not a problem. It'll actually make it a little bit easier to work with. Now, this lump, what is this lump all about? Well, there is a resistor in line with these anode connectors, about 25K. More commonly in old sets, you might see 1 mega ohm That'd typically be a resistor up in here somewhere using some unused lugs in the high voltage rectifier. Why would you want to have a resistor in series with the high voltage? Simple, to protect the flyback or the high voltage rectifier. In case this is dangling around because you're servicing or whatever, it falls off the CRT and shorts to something, this will offer some protection for current limiting. Or if there is arcing or some type of issue where there'd be excessive current draw, this acts as a current limiter. Simple enough. So, no, the original design did not call for it. I don't think it's going to be an issue. We shall see. I think these are both pretty much the same lead length. So we'll examine them a little bit closer, choose the one that's in better condition. I'm hard pressed to say they're pretty darn similar. Now in this case, there's actually a huge wedge where there's no external coating. So coating up here, coating down here, here it's just bare glass, but it was filthy. Some of that could very well have been some of this conductive coating that had come loose and fallen down and was making the surface conductive. So clean that off really well, try it off really well, and that is where the high voltage connects. So this is all glass around here, but that inner bit there, that is metal, and that's what that clip goes onto. Alright, let's see if that helped any. I think that may have done it. Yes. We've got a raster and no high voltage discharge. Cool. So now all the fun bits. I gotta tighten and secure everything. So for example, the yoke has this metal strap here that has to connect to that nut. Need to secure the chassis down and all the various bits like the AC connector, the side control, the speaker needs to get mounted over there, antenna terminal, and then there's this. I don't know where this goes. I need to refer to my reference photos, and I hope that will reveal the answer. So whatever it is, it doesn't seem to be obvious to the operation of the set or the holding the chassis together or anything. And then there's this, which slides over the neck and has 3 springs on it. I don't recall exactly what they clip to, but this is a centering magnets. 2 metal rings that are magnetized. They've got ears that come out, and you can rotate them against each other, and that centers the picture. I turned the set around, hooked up a pair of rabbit ears, and I'm receiving my little home transmitter again. And it's working. The brightness is decent, but there are bands of interference. I'm not quite sure if that's an issue with the set or with my transmitter. Before I worry about that, though, I'm going to hook up a test pattern generator to this and do all those adjustments finally. But I can already tell that now that I've graduated from the test CRT to the full-size CRT, obviously we fill up the whole image, or fill up the whole screen, no problem, and the vertical linearity looks pretty good as is. I think I have a little bit too much height because I'm seeing things getting clipped a little bit, maybe a little bit too much width, but the aspect ratio looks about right. Great sound. I've got this set hooked up to a test pattern generator now, and unfortunately there are a couple issues that I'm just not able to correct. One is vertical linearity. The linearity control seems to work to some extent, but the height control doesn't do a whole lot. I'd kind of noticed this on the workbench, and I was hoping it was just a matter of me using the little test CRT, but large one has the same issue. I swapped the 12AU7 vertical oscillator tube. Really didn't make much difference. I'll try swapping the vertical output tube, but I fear I may have to pull the chassis again and double check my work and make sure the vertical height control is good. It's not that it doesn't do anything, but it doesn't do anywhere near as much as it should. There's definitely too much height. When I get to one extreme, it starts folding over, but from one end towards the other, it just doesn't do a whole lot. So it's perhaps the controls have worn out and only one section's conducting, or perhaps I hooked something up wrong. The other issue is a little more annoying, which is a band of static interference that slowly moves. I've never seen anything quite like it before. I had thought earlier when I was using my transmitter, it's just that I was too far away and I didn't have a good antenna set up on the receiver. But now I've got a test pattern generator wired directly into it, and the problem is still there. See a band right here, it slowly moves up. Whenever you see a band of interference slowly moving through the vertical, it's a good indication you've got, well, noise in your vertical circuit or in the power supply, and it's derived from the 60 hertz line, so it's sort of, well, it's the same frequency as a vertical, but not quite in sync with it. Did not have this issue on the workbench. So when I put this back together, what did I do? What might have caused the problem? I'm not sure. I am sure I'm tired of working on the set, but keep going. I gotta take a look at the photos too and see about the lead dress on some of this stuff. For example, this is the speaker wire. Speakers over here. I don't think it should be running right across the high voltage box next to the horizontal output tube and dampened by the neck of the CRT. That seems like a lot of potential interference cropping up. But it plugs in here, and the speaker's over here, so it has to go through here in some manner. Also, notice there was this spring loop thing, which I think you're supposed to put the wires go into the CRT socket to kind of keep them out of the way of things. I'm not sure. There's something else curious. So, I'd mentioned several times about there being external conductive coating on the CRT, and it gets grounded. It gets grounded by this spring clip right up here. However, check out the picture on the TV. There, I just pulled it away. It is not making contact with the CRT anymore. And I put it back. It's really not doing much of anything. Which could be why I've got that interference. Maybe it's not being filtered out. So, either it's making ground contact somewhere else through something, which is entirely possible, or that area is just worn out from that spring rubbing around on it. It's not making good contact. Quick and easy way to check something like that is I'll take a piece of aluminum foil. Just tear off a rectangular sheet and just stick it underneath that spring clip, which will definitely be grounded through that spring, and it will act just like the coating does. If that makes some difference, well, then I know what the issue is. If it doesn't make any difference, then I gotta keep looking. Well, I had no recourse but to pull the chassis. The height and linearity controls were just not working the way they're supposed to. And I should know better. It's my own fault. When I was using that little test CRT, I convinced myself that maybe the set really was working right, and it was just because I was using a small CRT instead of a full-size 21-inch, but no. Really, the controls should work just as well with the small CRT. It's got the same deflection angle. I should have been able to get a good looking crosshatch pattern on the little test CRT. But I went ahead and put it in the full-size chassis anyways, and had exactly the same issues, so here it's back on the workbench. Alright, so I went over and pretty quickly found the problem, and I made a mistake. I'll show you how I found it. So here is the height control, and there's a linearity control. The schematic is slightly different than the set that I'm working with. It's for an earlier run, but I'll show you why I'm using this schematic in a moment. But the circuitry is close enough. So I checked the linearity control, E20 ohm resistor to ground, 3000 ohm control, and then it goes over to pin 2 on the tube. So I simply checked resistance from pin 2 of the tube to chassis ground, and it was around 2000 ohms, and it varied with this control through the range that it should be, which would be 820 ohms to about 4K. That was fine. And then I checked the height control. So I went from one end of the lug here up to pin 1 on the 12AU7, and I only got 15K. There's a 1.8 meg resistor in series with this control, so that was definitely a sign something was wrong. So I took a look on the circuit board, and it's hard to see, but down in here there are two resistors, a 1.8 meg and a 15K side by side. I've got them backwards. So the reason I was using this schematic is because I've got a parts placement diagram that goes along with that schematic. This guy right here. So it's those two resistors, R431, R433. Look on the schematic. R431 is a 1.8 meg, and R433 is a 15K. So R431, the 1.8 meg, should be the one closer to tube. And again, if we look down in here, it's kind of hard to see, but the 1.8 meg is the light blue resistor. It is not the one closest to the tube. So I've got those two flip-flopped, simple as that. So yes, major pain to pull all this back out, and now I've got to get in there and swap those two resistors around. And hopefully that should do the trick. One thing I'm on the fence about is do I hook up the test CRT and all that to make sure it's working right on the workbench, or am I confident enough that that's the problem and I can just go ahead and put this back in the cabinet and hook everything back up? Still on the fence about that, but For sure. I will swap those two resistors right now. Well, I decided to take a gamble and put it back in the cabinet without testing it. And voila! That is what it's supposed to look like. It still needs a little tweaking, but basically it's there. The height control does what it's supposed to do. Linearity control does what it's supposed to do. Got some semblance of a decent crosshatch pattern, so that is awesome. Alright, a little more tweaking. Things are definitely starting to shape up. This is a multi-burst bar sort of pattern. So each one of these blocks represents sort of higher resolution. Ideally, you can see very fine vertical stripes on one end. Just about there. And here is a circle. Pretty decent circle. I don't have the centering magnets on there yet, so I don't expect it to be perfectly dead center, but it's a pretty round circle, so that's a good thing. Here's a closer look at that quick fix with the aluminum foil. I also sanded down that metal wire loop with some fine sandpaper. So without that being in place, you can have a couple issues. One, you don't have any filter on the high voltage, so you can get noise in the picture. But also, if it is intact but has cracks in it, you can get little micro arcs between the cracked sections of the external coating. So you definitely want to have a good, solid, continuous, grounded external coating on these sets. There's a product called Slip Plate you can use, which is a spray graphite. Comes in an aerosol can. Also something called, I think, Aerodag, but that gets pretty expensive, so I really recommend Slip Plate. You can get it from Granger and a number of other industrial suppliers. Mask off the CRT and spray it on just like spray paint. Finally, I actually got a decent image out of this set. Been far more work than I ever expected.
Mister, I'm going to tell you once more. I didn't see your lousy wallet. No girl works here. If you got yourself...
All what's left is I need to secure the yoke and centering magnets, final tweak the linearity, and then take off this front safety glass and clean it. But otherwise, I think finally there.